Today's topic is multicultural Korea. I think it follows very naturally from the last week's topic on aging. And let's see what's in store for you. Okay, the making of multicultural Korea. And this is the lecture outline. Quite a few to cover in less than 2 hours, but we'll try our best. Okay? And I'll tell you right away, the part that's most important is this: theories of global migration. Okay? Anyway, I'll get right to the point. The questions to be discussed in today's class are: how multicultural is Korea? How is international migration related to increasing ethnic diversity of many societies, including Korea? What are the factors which account for the making of multicultural reality in Korea? And lastly, what are the implications of the multicultural Korea for debates in multiculturalism? Okay? All right, the making of a multicultural Korea, facts. Currently, Korea is considered one of the most ethnically homogeneous societies in the world, with ethnic Koreans representing about 96% of the total population. Do you know of any other societies or countries where its population comprises of nearly 100% same ethnic group? Japan? See, the way you're having a hard time coming up with other examples other than Japan is because it's very rare. Okay? We're not just talking about so-called racial homogeneity, it's about ethnic homogeneity, right? So Korea is in a unique situation in this regard. So until the early 1900s, Korea was almost completely ethnically homogeneous. Okay? And here are some numbers. Okay? So the number of foreign residents has been growing rapidly since the late 1990s. For example, in 1990, only about 100,000 foreign residents were in Korea, representing 0.23% of the total population. So it's not an exaggeration that as late as 1990, Korea was, again, almost 100% ethnically homogeneous. But that changed in 20 years? So in 2009, there were more than 1 million foreign residents, representing nearly 2% of the total population. And that's a tenfold increase in less than 20 years. And 2018, that's the year when the number of foreigners living in Korea reached the 2 million mark, okay, or 4% of the total population. 2019 is the year when the largest number of foreigners lived in Korea, and that's when the number of foreigners reached 2.5 million, representing about 5% of the total population. So both 2.5 and 5% is record for Korea. Okay? But then after 2019, COVID-19 pandemic forced many foreigners to return home. So that's why it's still our record, but a record that will soon be broken. Because right now, foreigners have come back and we'll be having more foreigners coming to Korea to work and to marry Koreans. Okay? So here it is. So from just 0.1% in 1980, 0.2% in 1990, all the way to 4.9% in 2019. And the latest, we have 2.2 million foreigners, representing about 4.4%. Okay? So the projection is this. By about 2040, the proportion of foreigners living in Korea will maybe head toward 10% of the total population. Okay? Again, just the projection, and that will largely depend on the Korean immigration policy. Okay? And the number of foreigners by their countries of origin, the number one, or the ethnic group with, I cannot even say in words, because you see, Korean Chinese, are they, their citizenship is Chinese, but they're Koreans. But they're counted as foreigners. Does that make sense to you? And what about North Koreans? You see? So the reason I'm showing you this is this. A sizable number and a proportion of so-called foreigners, in fact, comprises of Koreans. Okay? Especially Korean Chinese. Koreans from China. Okay? So this is from 2021, so nearly 1/3 of so-called foreigners happen to be Koreans. Okay? And another thing to let you know is this. There are quite a few Americans, right? 140,000. Considerable proportion of that number comprises of Korean Americans. Okay? Again, who have American citizenship, but they have come back to Korea to live, especially older generation. Okay? So again, keep that in mind. Okay? The Korean case affirms the universalization and acceleration of international migration. As delete this, okay? As every society is affected by migration. Do you know of any country that is not affected by migration? Even North Korea has migrants. Okay? You know, there are thousands of North Koreans who work abroad. Okay? And there are also migrants from outside of North Korea who live in North Korea. So again, universalization and acceleration of international migration. It's all part of globalization. Okay? More importantly, the Korean case reveals something not readily recognized by casual observers, and that is international migration of people as either migrant workers and migrant brides is a key factor for the making of racially and ethnically diverse societies all over the world. You see, if you think about this question, how do societies become multicultural? Simple answer, migration. International migration. And has this happened all the time, or it has intensified in the last century or so? So that's why when we talk about the impact of globalization, one of them is often mentioned as international migration. Okay? So Like trade, migration has increased significantly in recent decades, right? So, a report by the UN shows that the number of people who live and or work outside their countries of birth has more than doubled over the last 40 years to 281 million in 2021. The total is about 3.6% of the world's population, or 1 in about every 28 persons. Accordingly, there are 5 general trends of international migration. 5 general trends of international migration. 1, globalization of migration. Obvious enough, right? So migration has become globalized, okay? More and more countries are affected by migration, and migrants come from much more diverse areas of origin, okay? Second, acceleration of migration. International migration is continuing to grow in size all across the globe, right? So one is global, second is more, right? Third, differentiation of migration. And what does this mean? Before, migrants typically just referred to migrant workers, okay? But now you have bride migration, student migration, family reunion, refugees, asylum seekers, and so on. If you were to include something, can you think of anything else when it comes to global migration? Okay? So easy to remember, right? Globalization of migration, acceleration of migration, differentiation, and fourth, feminization of migration. This does not mean that more females migrate. It just simply means that compared to the past, it's almost like half and half, it is said, okay? When it comes to global migration, the gender ratio is about half and half, okay? So compared to the past, more women migrate, okay? To work or as brides or to study, okay? And fifth, the growing politicization of migration, because there's so many people who migrate, it becomes a political issue. It becomes a diplomatic issue regarding, visas and so on. Okay? Simple enough, right? 5 general trends of migration. Which country do you think send the largest number of migrants? Just for fun. This is your first. Is this my first question today? China? No. Thank you. India? Possibly. Can't be Philippines. The population size just does not even come close. I think it's India or Mexico. Let's check. It's India. India, number 1, followed by Mexico. Number 3, Russia. That's a surprise. I mean, this is before the war. Okay? So China is number 4, followed by Bangladesh, Syria, and so on. I'm surprised the US is not there. Because they have troops in many parts of the world, and anyway, which continent do you think was the destination for the largest number of international migrants in 2017? Asia, Europe, North America, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, or Oceania? Your answer is Europe. My answer is Asia. So the green shaded bar is 2017, navy blue 2000. You see, Asia beat Europe just barely. Okay, so it's cool to migrate to Asia. Come to Asia. It's more fun. Just kidding. I don't know if it's more fun, but anyway, another trend to take notice is a migration pattern between the North and the South. Do you know the difference between the North and the South? Well, here it is. The North-South divide is a socio-economic and political division of the world. The North is synonymous with economically developed nations of the world, including the West, Japan, Korea, and Singapore. The South represents developing countries, most of which are found in South America, Africa, and South Asia. You see the difference now? And I'll show you a map. You see, North is in blue. Okay? So North America, Europe, and Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. Okay? And among others, right? Now the question is, in terms of international migrants, countries of origin and destination, which type was most popular in 2017? North to north, north to south, south to south, and south to north. You see, that's the most obvious answer, right? If the correct answer is the most obvious answer, I would not have put this kind of a question to you. So think outside the box, and the right answer is? I think it is. South to south? Yes, thank you. Number one. Just amazing, isn't it? You would expect, the number one type would be south to north, right? But when you look at the number, when you count the actual migrants, it's south to south. And I don't think it's because they preferred to migrate to south. It's just that countries in the north, they have so many tough immigration rules, right? Anyway, now we turn to theories of global migration, and I advertise this fact that this is the most important part, right? Because through this, you understand why people migrate, right? Which, again, makes societies multicultural, okay? No society. Anyway, I'll stop there. Theories of globalization, global migration. The question is, what are the factors for the rise in globalization, which accounts for the increasing ethnic diversity in most countries of the world, including Korea? Migration is as old as human societies and is an integral component of human behavior. From antiquity, our ancestors migrated to different locations for various reasons, such as out of curiosity, to find food, to search for better grazing and agricultural lands, to escape natural disasters, to seek protection from adversaries, to conquer land for new settlements, and to obtain religious and political and social freedoms. I'm not talking about these. I'm talking about something that's more recent and more real. So if I have this on the on the final exam, I don't want you to write about this. These are not theories of globalization. Theories of global migration. When I say theories of global migration, I'll be referring to the next 5 theories of global migration. And they are Um, I don't envy you for having to memorize these heavy, loaded, worded, I cannot even say. Anyway, there are many more, but I think these 5 are the most important ones, okay? So if you are not familiar, so again, if you want to know more about any idea that I tell you about, what do? Look it up, right? So let's say on the internet you write theories of global migration, and do you think you'll get hits or not? You will, okay? So please do that for every other concept or theory that I sort of gloss over, okay? All right, so I'll go one by one, okay? First theory is neoclassical economics, and it's also known as, so potential migrants weigh the cost and benefits of moving to alternative locations. So migration occurs as a result of a rational choice made at the individual level. You see, this theory argues that people migrate to places outside the place of their birth by weighing cost and benefits. See whether it's good or bad. And I don't know if you already have got this. If you weigh the cost and benefits, it's about push-pull. Does everyone know what push-pull theory is? Push is a negative factor, something that pushes you out of your country. And pull factor is something attractive, something positive. Okay? So, neoclassical economics theory is also known as push-pull theory. Push, again, negative, pull, positive. So let's say you are in Korea in 1960. And it's the 1960s when many Koreans migrated to the USA. Now, what are the push factors of Korea back in 1960? Poverty, lack of job opportunities, lack of educational opportunities because there were just so few colleges that even if you're good, you couldn't go to college, okay? And what about political instability? This crazy North Korea always trying to attack Korea again, that's really happening back in 1960, okay? Sorry for saying crazy, whatever, right? But political instability was also the case. Those are push factors of Korea, right? Now, those who went to USA, why? What were some pull factors of the USA? Job opportunities, high living standard, political stability, and anything else? Better quality of life, American football, hamburger, just kidding, French fries. You see, now you know what push and pull factors are, right? And just for your pleasure, I have listed all these push factors and pull factors. Take a good look. So if you type push-pull factor or theory on the internet, what do you get? You get similar results. Not the exact same, but you will get good results. Okay, so please look it up. So now you get the idea. So this is one theory, most well-known theory as to why people migrate. They weigh the cost and benefits, push and pull factors, and they make a choice to migrate. Okay? That's the first one. Second one is called New Economics of Migration. And there isn't much to say other than to say that migration is a family decision. See, if you look at migrant workers in Korea, they typically send money back home to their families. So that's a sign that this is happening. Okay? So families, they have a meeting. We're making this kind of money, but I think we need someone to work abroad because the wages, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but do you know why people from South Asia come to Korea to work? I mean, the competition to come to Korea to work is like 10 to 1. Okay? Why? Because again, the minimum wage that they get in Korea is anywhere between 5 to 10 times higher than what they would get back home with a college degree. So just doing a manual labor in Korea can get you that much money, right? So that's why families are very serious about sending someone from their family to work outside of Korea, outside of their country, to work in countries like Japan and Korea, so that they send money back home, and that's called remittance, right? You know how, for example, the Philippines, because they have so many workers working outside the Philippines, the remittances account for like 1/5 of the GDP. I mean, I'm not sure about the exact amount, but it's a quite significant amount of money, right? So that's the second theory. But the most interesting theory is the third one. Okay? And here we go. Third theory is called historical structural approach. See, don't blame me for this name. Anyway, the idea behind this theory is this. Migration is intrinsic to capitalism. You see, what is capitalism about? Capitalism is in the business of what? Fill in the blank for me, please. Capitalism is in the business of making profit, right? And how does capitalism maximize profit? By cutting costs. So what's the best way of cutting costs? Two ways. Cheaper labor and cheaper material. Now, material, you can't really do much about that, right? Because there's a going rate of whatever ingredients or the materials you need to manufacture whatever. But we have cheaper costs that can be achieved by using cheap labor. Okay? That's why many firms, especially from the USA, where did they relocate to? They relocated to countries where labor is cheaper, right? And what about anybody from France? Okay, you know the largest ethnic group in France, other than French, is Algerians. How did they end up going there? I know, but ultimately, why were they brought into France? To mobilize cheap labor. And how did Indians end up being in England? Cheap labor. Okay? And why are migrant laborers in Korea. Cheap labor. Okay? And if you go back further in time, what is the tragic event in human history that happened that was about this? Slavery. It's ultimately to make use of cheap labor. Okay? So this is the most powerful theory, okay, of all five that I'll be talking about, which explains why global migration happens. Isn't this just shocking? That now you're like knowing this for the first time and you go, wow. No? It's just me. Okay, so this is the third theory. And fourth one is called, and examples in history and in modern period. And what about mobilization of Korean workers by Japan during World War II? About 4 million Koreans, which amounted to about 1/6 of the total population, were taken as forced laborers during World War II. So that's another example of mobilizing cheap labor. Okay? Fourth is called dual labor market theory. Okay? And this is this. When a country reaches a certain level of economic development, the people there are better educated, wealthier, and they are more status conscious. And what do? They shun away or turn away from certain jobs. And those certain jobs are low paying and less prestigious, so-called 3D jobs. Do you know what 3D jobs are? This will be on the final exam. 3D jobs are jobs that are dirty, dangerous, and difficult. And in Japan, it is also called 4D jobs. First three are the same. Dirty, dangerous, difficult. Fourth, demeaning. Less prestigious. So manual labor at a construction site would be a typical 3D job. Dirty, dangerous, difficult. Okay? So just put Korea there. Okay? Korean young people, they're better educated, they're wealthier, and they are status conscious. So do they want to work in small to mid-sized manufacturing firms? You know, we have hundreds of thousands of young people who are currently unemployed, but we have these jobs that could pay them $2,000, $3,000 a month. And these firms cannot find Korean workers. How do you explain that? And this explains that, right? That's the dual labor market theory, okay? And fifth is hypergamy. The concept refers to the act or practice of a person marrying a spouse of higher caste or social status than themselves. So this is from the caste system of India. Did you know that each caste has subcaste? So the idea of hypergamy is you marry someone with a higher subcaste than yourself. Okay? So this concept has been applied to cases where a person makes a conscious effort, marry someone of higher status. So this would explain how a woman from Cambodia marries a man from Korea. Now, how would you just say, it's a hypergamy? Maybe you could say, they got married because they loved each other. It's a possibility, but as I'll explain to you later, what is involved in, when Korean men go on a marriage hunting spree, where everything happens in 1 week. You have a meeting with dozens of women. They date for a couple of days. They get married. So everything is done in 3-4 days. Is that love or hypergamy? Chances are it's hypergamy. Okay? So we'll talk more about that later. In recent years, again, women from developing countries have migrated to marry men living in richer countries such as Japan and Taiwan, Korea. Okay? Hypogamy is the opposite. You marry down. Okay? A person marries someone of lower social class or status. The question is, what are the factors facilitating the increasing ethnic diversity in Korea? There are 3 factors. Influx of migrant workers, influx of migrant brides, and third, rise in the number of multicultural children. Okay? Okay. Turn to the first factor, influx of migrant workers. Korea had actually been a migrant-sending country from the mid-19th century until recently. Okay? So, I don't know if, I'm sure I mentioned this before, right? That we have over 7 million Koreans living overseas. That's a true sign that Korea had actually been a migrant-sending country. Okay? But it is almost stopped to a trickle. So the only sort of people who actually migrate today, I think they tend to be students. Okay? Other than that, you don't see any Korean really migrating to enjoy a better living standard elsewhere. Okay? But Korea began to import labor in earnest from the mid-1990s because many small to mid-sized manufacturing firms could not find Korean workers. Okay? The most important reason for importing migrant laborers has not been labor shortage. Okay? Again, we don't have a labor shortage. I mean, we will face labor shortage in the near future because of record low fertility rate. But as of now, as 10, 20 years ago, we never had labor shortage. Okay? But we did have to bring in migrant workers because status conscious, better educated, wealthier Koreans, they simply did not want to work in 3D jobs. And which theory applies to this? If you have a good memory, yes, dual labor market theory. Okay? So if you talk about why Korea was sort of forced, or what theory is applicable to the Korean case, it's dual labor market theory. Now, is that the end of the story? No. So let's say you're an entrepreneur or you're a factory owner, okay? Now you have this problem of Koreans not really want to work at your factory. Now, just put yourself in the shoe of a factory owner, okay? You have 2 choices. One, make your job attractive by offering more incentives, like higher wages, better working conditions, many, many days of holiday. That's one choice. Second choice, bring in migrant workers for 1/3 of the cost. What does you do if you're a factory owner? Migrant workers. And that theory is migration is intrinsic to capitalism. So two theories apply to the Korean context. Okay? All right? So that's why migration of manual laborers to Korea has happened. Okay? And these unskilled migrant workers are typically employed in construction, auto parts, textiles, furniture manufacturing, and agricultural and fishing industries. Now, if you ever buy any fruit or vegetable, you can bet your money that they were harvested or picked by migrant workers. In any farm you visit today, they just cannot find Korean workers because in the countryside, there are no young people to begin with, and any hand that they need, they have to get help from migrant workers. So I'm not putting them down in any way, but they're making a killing because they're in such a big demand. Okay. The extent to which many small to mid-sized manufacturing firms and farms in Korea are so dependent on migrant laborers is indicated by the fact that these enterprises will simply not be able to operate without the latter's labor input. So Korea's small to mid-sized manufacturing firms just would not be able to survive without these migrant workers. And Korean farms, Korean fishing villages would collapse if one day every one of them left. Okay, we're talking about more than 1.5 million migrant workers. Imagine them leaving Korea at once. Everything will come to a standstill. Okay? From the beginning, Korea attracted workers from a dozen or so Asian countries, including China, particularly Korean Chinese, Vietnam, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Mongolia, and Indonesia. Okay? And we do also have some migrants from Africa. Okay? The number of migrant workers in Korea is expected to increase in the future. Why? Low fertility rate, right? So I talked at length about the aging population in Korea, right? So I just will share with you one slide. So this is 2017, and we're about here, right? So we reached a peak in 2017 when economically active population, which is the age between 15 and 64, our best rate was in 2017 when the economically active population had 73% of the total population. But from that point on, you see how it is shrinking? So by 2067, the elderlies would exceed the total of the economically active population. So the key point here is the proportion of the economically active population because they're the ones who are working and paying taxes. And that is shrinking at a record rate in Korea today. And that means more migrant workers will have to be brought in. Unless Koreans start to have like 3 babies per couple. Okay? All right? So on that note, we'll take a break. I'll see you back here at 6:10. It's 6:03 right now. 6:10. Okay, welcome back. Having discussed how Korea has become multicultural, the first factor was the influx of migrant workers, and I ended the discussion with a forecast that even more migrant workers will be brought in because of the record low fertility rates. That's been happening in the last like 10 years, right? So I think the importation of laborers will become more intense, I think, in the next, from about 10 years, from like 10 years from now. The second factor for the making of multicultural reality is the increase in the immigration of brides, okay? And, well, when it comes to my bride migrants, there are some sort of negative stereotypes like internet marriage, mail order brides, bogus marriage, the selling of sex for visas, and more, right? And yes, these are harsh words, but you know, to a certain extent, it sort of makes sense, and I'll explain to you why that is the case. Okay, these are again stereotypes where international marriage is sort of arranged by an agency that is in the business of making money, right? And so this idea that sort of the marriage has become like a commercial transaction. Okay? Anyway, these stereotypes are somewhat warranted because a large majority of marriages between Korean men and women from other Asian countries take place through matchmaking agencies. The rise in international marriage has been on the rise, especially since the mid-2000s, because for decades there has been a gender imbalance in rural parts of Korea. So this is what happened. During the country's rapid industrialization and modernization in the 1960s and 70s, young women typically headed to cities for jobs and marriage, while many of their male counterparts stayed behind to work on the land and to look after their aging parents. Okay? When men in the countryside reached marrying age and looked for Korean women to marry, guess what happened? They just could not find Korean women willing to marry these men who were living in the countryside. These women just did not want to get married to men who were not only living in the countryside, but 2 other reasons. These men were typically not affluent. They were like a mid to lower middle class, okay? Second, they were farmers or fishermen, both occupations which are not highly regarded. And most importantly, again, they were living in the countryside, okay? And you know, country life now is much better than what it used to be. Okay, it's you have a modern washroom. No matter where you go, it has a pleasant lifestyle of urban life now, but still, again, back in 20, 30 years ago, it wasn't nice. Okay. Anyway, as the number of Korean men in the countryside in their late 30s, 40s, and even 50s who could not find a Korean wife steadily increased to an alarming level, local governments jumped in to help. Now, this is not just any kind of a fiction. This really happened. When so many men in the countryside or reached their 40s and even 50s, the local government was alarmed. And so guess what it did? It was concerned that, with all these men getting old and not finding wife, the villages themselves were in danger of disappearing from the map of Korea, right? So that's why these local governments started to subsidize private marriage brokers who could introduce bachelor farmers to ethnic Korean women in China. So the first wave of international marriages involved Korean men in rural areas marrying Korean Chinese, all through the effort of local governments, which paid money to brokers. That's how it all began. In due time, the industry of transnational marriage brokers soon emerged. And no longer, it was no longer limited to Korean Chinese, but it was open to countries like the Philippines and Vietnam. I don't know if you could find another example in another country where a local government subsidized finding a foreign wife, okay, using tax money, right? As of May 2020, there are 380 matchmaking agencies which cater to international marriages. 380. Okay? And what's happening now is this. Even young people living in urban areas, take up service from these brokers to find wives from Vietnam and so on. Okay? So anyway, going back to the earlier comment about international marriages being associated with such negative stereotypes as mail order brides and bogus marriages, it is pertinent to take a look at how international arranged marriages brokered by matchmaking agencies work. And this is real. Brokers recruit bachelors and take them in groups to overseas countries and hold events in which each man meets groups of women, sometimes in the form of 1 versus 25. You know what that means? A man would be sitting in the center, 25 women line up, okay? And each wearing a number, okay? So the man would pick any number of women that he likes, and another 25 would come in, for example. So he would write down a short list, and until he arrives at final, one person that he likes, he would have the women come, back in and so on, right? And that's why it has a name, bridal shopping, okay? Men are promised that they will meet an unlimited number of women until they find the one they like. To get the service of an international matchmaking agency, Korean men have to pay a fee, which often ranges from 1,000 to 1,500, plus expenditures, including those for airfare, hotel, meals, etc. Once a match is made, a couple goes through the whole process of dating to wedding within 6 or 7 days, or 5 nights and 6 days, or 6 nights and 7 days. It goes like this. Again, this is when a match is made. Okay? And of course, a man picks this particular woman, and she has to agree, right? But no is almost never heard of, because these women sign up to marry Korean men. So often they do not say no, because once you say no, you get kicked out of the group. Because these women are typically, some women actually stay in like a dorm just to meet Korean men. Okay? So anyway, go on dating for a day or two, meet parents-in-law, hold wedding, honeymoon for a day or two, return to Korea. So that's why, the sort of these negative stereotypes apply to international marriages. Okay? And these banners used to be allowed to be hung in the countryside. Now it's illegal. They're banned. Okay? But I'm just showing you how bad things used to be. Okay? These women were like treated like commodities. Okay? So what does this say? Blind date, adventure tour. Okay? To meet and marry a Vietnamese woman, 6 nights, 7 days for 1 million won. That's, I don't know, maybe this is like from 20 years ago. Now this is not bad compared to what's in store for you next. Look at this. It says, first-time marriage, remarriage, physically handicapped, old man get married to a Vietnamese woman. Here, same thing. She will not run away. If she runs away, 50% refund. Same thing. She'll never run away. First time marriage, remarriage, physically handicapped, old men up to age 65. Do you think if a man is 65 and goes to any of these countries, he'll meet someone older? No. We're talking about women in their 20s. Okay? First time marriage, remarriage, twilight marriage. So men in their 60s. Okay? So I actually got this on the street, because I had this man, I think it was a woman, handing these cards out. And I usually get whatever are being handed out, because I'm a nice guy. Because you get those, and their job is done sooner, right? So anyway, I got this, and when I saw that it was this particular card, I knew I hit a jackpot. So I took a picture of this, right? Wow, this is 70s. And they have included a new type of woman, North Korean woman. Okay? And this is in the heart of a very wealthy district. It says here, International Marriage Agency. Okay? So the reason I have this photograph is, again, you would think that these international marriage agencies are just found in the countryside. Think again. This is this is Bangbae-dong, one of the wealthiest districts of Korea, and they have an international marriage agency there. Not all intermarriages involving Korean men and foreign women take this form, of course, but what all of this indicates is the rise in the number of migrant brides. The proportion of intermarriages in total marriages in Korea has increased significantly since 1990, soaring to about 7 to 10% of all marriages in Korea in the last 10 years. So here's a figure. So you see, back in 1990, only 1.2% of all marriages involved international marriage. But we hit our record in 2005, where 13.5% of all marriages involved foreigner and a Korean. Okay? And then it fell to like 7%, but it rose to over 10% again for the first time in 18 years last year. And you can bet your money that it'll stay up for some time to come and even higher. Okay? Why do I make that projection? So if the projection for the increased labor migration is because of low fertility rate, what is the reason for this forecast? That more migrant brides will be brought in the near future. Why am I saying that? Yes. Okay, that's a good guess. But soon enough, there will be bride shortage, if it's not happening already. And if labor shortage is caused by low fertility rate, what could be caused by bride shortage? Less number of females. And how is that achieved? Sex-selective abortions. Koreans had a very strong son preference for a long time. Thankfully, we don't have that anymore. So do you know when ultrasound was made available? Anyway, ultrasound, as you know, is used to determine the sex of the fetus, right? And they became under mass usage, like in the late 1960s, at least in Korea. So just to I think I jumped ahead too much. Just for fun, let me look at the time. Okay. As for the nationalities of foreign wives, they largely comprise of other Asians, including those from developing countries. And here we go. Foreign wives by nationality, 2021, number 1 is Vietnam. Okay? Number 2, China. Number 3, Korean Chinese. 4th, Japan. That's a surprise, isn't it? And Philippines, Thailand, Cambodia, and others. So there you go. What about husbands? Considerable proportion comprise of those from the economically advanced nations, such as the US, Canada, and the UK. But still, number 1 is Korean Chinese. Number 2, China. Number 3, Vietnam. But from this point on, you have developed countries, USA, Japan, Canada, and UK. Like labor importation, so this is where I'm getting at. Bride importation until now has not been due to shortage of brides, but rather Korean women's aversion to marrying low-income men living in the countryside, especially farmers, fishermen, and factory workers. However, a shortage of brides is expected to happen over the next 2 decades or so, if it's not already happening. This is because millions of female fetuses are believed to have been aborted from the early 1970s to the early 2000s, leading to the current and future shortage of brides. So there had been extensive sex-selective abortions, although abortion had been illegal until 2021. Again, Koreans had a strong son preference. And again, abortion in South Korea was decriminalized effective 2021. But since the founding of the Republic in 1948, it was illegal, okay? But still, it was not strictly enforced. Okay, that's why we know. So how do we know? How do we know that there were extensive sex-selective abortions? Yes. Very good. So you know that there were, or there must have been, extensive sex-selective abortions if you look at the sex ratio at birth. Do you know what sex ratio at birth is? Sex ratio at birth is this: number of male birth per 100 female birth. So whenever you talk about ratio, it's like 50-50, 60-40, so out of 100, right? But one exception. Sex ratio at birth is, memorize this, number of male birth per 100 female birth. And here is a $1 million quiz. Do you think, okay, never mind million, I don't have that kind of money. Maxim Coffeeworth question. Do you think, naturally speaking, which gender has more babies, girls or boys? Naturally, for every 100 female birth, are there more boys born or what? Believe it or not, more males are born. And the number is 105. Why do you think more males are born naturally? Have you heard? So here you go. $105? Remember, we know that female fetuses were aborted because you look at this. Sex ratio at birth in selected years. As early as 1970, there were roughly 5 more boys were born for every 100 female birth. Our record is 1990, when close to 12 boys, extra boys were born per 100 female birth. You see, it adds up from 1970 to like 210. For 40 years, female fetuses were aborted. And that's why it's in the millions. Okay? And again, to the question, why are more males born naturally? Here's the answer. Have you heard of the concept called equilibrium? Equilibrium in a colloquial term means balance. Have you heard of the saying that nature always achieves balance? Nature knows how to take care of itself because it always maintains balance. So how is, more males being born maintain balance? Because, look at this, boys and male youth are more risk-taking, more aggressive, and engage more in extreme sports and activities. So by the time males and females reach reproductive age, it becomes equal. 99-99, for example. Who is more likely to die from accidents like car driving? Men. What about drug overdose? There you go. You see the point about equilibrium? Why more males are born than females? Simply amazing act of nature taking care of itself. Males also have a higher infant mortality rate and are more vulnerable to death from practically all types of disease. Did you know that? Females, by nature, are stronger. Also, mentally, I think. Okay. This is the key point. Ultimately, sex ratio evens out. Okay? Hence, reaching equilibrium. All right? So again, go back to the chart. Look at this. This is a normal rate. So all these years, extra males. Okay? Now, do you understand why a forecast is made? That more brides will be brought in. Okay? I think it's starting to show. Here, right? It's spiked up, and I think it will continue to rise. It will be in the double digit for sure. Okay? So what all of this indicates is that the number of extra males has been accumulating for more than 4 decades in Korea, from 1970 to 2015. I'll just show you this briefly. Birth order specific sex ratio means sex ratio for the firstborn in the family, secondborn, thirdborn, and fourthborn, right? So you see, back in like 1990, for the third child in the family, sex ratio was 193. For the fourth child, 228. So for every 100 female birth, for the fourth child in all of the families in Korea, there were 228 males born. It's simply crazy, isn't it? But that's how bad things used to be. Okay? So, as a consequence, Korea is expected to face a serious marriage squeeze. That is assuming that, all males want to get married. Okay, so I think one thing that sort of counters this trend is that many Korean men not willing to get married, right? So that may sort of keep the rising number of international marriage in check, but still it will have, I think, lasting impact. The next two decades and longer, therefore, the actual shortage of women will be the reason why intermarriages will increase in Korea. Okay? All right, turning to the third factor for the making of multicultural Korea, it's the increase in the number of multicultural children. Okay? Due to the increase in intermarriages, there has been a steady rise in the number of multicultural children, that is, biracial or bi-ethnic children. According to the National Statistical Office, there were, as of 2021, more than 384,000 multicultural children in Korea, representing about 0.7% of the total population. So the number and the proportion is very modest, but you can bet any money that the number and the proportion will increase steadily in the near future. As you can see here, currently 5% of all birth is accounted for by multicultural children. So compare 0.7% to 5%. That's quite a lot, right? So that'll add up in the near future. And here is a figure. So this is the number of multicultural children, the number of birth of multicultural children, and that's the proportion. Okay? So every year it's 4% to 5%, and that will again have an impact in making Korea more multicultural. Okay? All right, this is the last part. So then, Korea is becoming multicultural. What are the implications? Okay? And the first implication I want to talk about is how low-wage service jobs will largely become the domain of migrant workers in Korea. So one thing already happening is how waiters and waitresses in Korea, there are so many of them. I mean, if you go to if you drive outside of Seoul, you go to any restaurant, you will probably be served by a foreigner. Okay? It started to happen in the capital region, but soon enough, again, low-wage service jobs will be taken over by migrant workers. If Korea takes the step of what's happening in the West, okay? And right now, it is said that Korea is like 20 years behind Japan when it comes to social change. I'm not saying 20 years behind economically or whatever. I'm just saying what happened in Japan 20 years ago is likely to happen Korea, again, 20 years later. And right now, if you go to Japan and you go to a convenience store, cashiers, this is what I heard, right? Many of them happen to be foreigners. So they just cannot find Japanese workers to work as cashiers. So we'll see what happens to Korea 20 years from now. Okay? Second is the Korean case points to a new trend that can be called the regionalization of international migration. So like 20 years ago, the trend was for people from Asia to migrate to North America, to Europe. But just looking at what's happening in Korea and the rest of Asia is that more people are migrating within Asia. Okay? So that's why we call it regionalization of international migration. So there is a intra-regional immigration more than inter regional migration. Third is, Korean case reminds us that research on race and ethnicity needs to focus more on the latter as a social problem. You see, when it comes to sort of the West, the focus has always been racial tension, racial issues, right? But if you look at Korea, you have, again, if you look at 2 million foreigners living in Korea, a vast majority of them are from other parts of Asia. And are we living in peace and with full mutual respect and everything? No. There is a very hidden sort of a tension, and also Koreans tend to look down on other Asians, right? So what we have is a problem that is not centered on race or racial differences, but ethnic differences and ethnicity. Okay, so the focus needs to be more on the ethnicity or ethnic differences, right? So if there's any educational goal, it is to teach youth about respecting people of different cultural backgrounds. Okay? And fourth, racism in Korea. Has anybody experienced racism in Korea? Hands up. Oh, was it a hand? Was it because of like you're talking loud, for example? Okay. Mm. So you can see how some, like especially old Koreans, they just are not used to being sort of surrounded or being around foreigners. So I apologize on behalf of Koreans. Anyone else? Anybody who was denied entry to a club because you happen to be a foreigner? No? Because he couldn't speak Korean or what? I see. And you know, like nightclubs also discriminate on the basis of age. So if you appear to be like over 30, they'll stop you from going in. Hmm? Oh, that is so stupid. So I just hope you don't take it personally. It's just that some Koreans are not really used to, again, being around foreigners. That's it, you know. Yes, you had your hand up. So you can see how Korea has some way to go before becoming more open, right, and being more tolerant of people who are of a different cultural backgrounds. Anyway, we have some data that show Koreans to be more racist than others. Okay, so here is this one. Well, here is preliminary observations. Koreans tend to be insensitive to the issue of racism because it has rarely been an issue. Did you know that our country is founded on this ideology of ethnic homogeneity, right? So much so that our constitution, you know, the first, do you say verse or what do you say? Clause? It's always something like no one should be discriminated on the basis of age, you know, creed, whatever, right? Our constitution does not include the term race or ethnicity because we just didn't need to have that as an issue. Okay. So, and also, do we have a law against racism? No. So we have a long way to go, and that's why I think this point is valid. And also, unlike in the West, the issue of racism is not rigorously dealt with. And mass media, especially comedy shows, still make fun of foreigners. Okay? Believe it or not. An international survey does find that Koreans are prone to being racist. And here is the question. This is from 2013 World Survey. 34.1% of Koreans said they would not want people of another race as their neighbors. Now, if you just look at 34%, you may go, isn't that not bad? But again, this is a global survey, and look where Korea stands. Okay, this is based on more than 80 countries, right? So again, you know, the question was, those who responded that they would not want people of another race as their neighbor were deemed racially intolerant. And so the higher the percentage, higher the racist attitude, right? So key findings of the survey: most racially tolerant countries. So only up to 4.9% of the respondents said that they do not want people of another race as their neighbor. Okay? So the countries included the US, Canada, and so on. 5 to 9.9% of the respondents said they do not want people of another race as their neighbor, and so on, right? So you can see how many of these countries you're familiar with, and look where Korea stands. So least tolerant is Jordan. Second least tolerant, India. So Korea belongs in this third most racially intolerant group of countries. Okay? So, sorry. Well, that's all I have for you, but do you have any questions? Yes. Very good question. There have been some sensational cases where these migrant brides were abused by their husbands, and they had no other recourse other than to leave their husbands. So in the beginning, if they left their husbands, they were forced to go back to their country, but not anymore. But they do need to stay in Korea for more than 5 years to get permanent residency. And so we do have legal means to help these women who are abused by their Korean husbands. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, and I'll see you next week.